Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to make a fun Flippy Flappy card with some Christmas tartan. Hope you enjoy! So I started these cards by making my Christmas tartan with the plaid stencils from Lawn Fawn. So on the first card I used Vintage Photo Distress ink as my base color. Now one of my tips for using the plaid stencils, if you're having trouble lining them up, is to use a piece of paper that is larger than the stencil. So in this case I'm using a piece of A5 paper, which is about 6 inches by 8 inches. And after I remove the first layer, you can see it's very easy to place the second layer because you can see where the ink has overlapped on the edges. Now for the second layer, I'm going to use aged mahogany distress ink. And I just love the combination of the brown and the red. It looks so cozy. So another one of my tips for using this plaid stencil is to use something to secure the stencil. So I'm using my Make Art Station with magnets, but you could also use Post-it note tape and secure the stencil to the paper with Post-it note tape. So on this one, I used Bundled Sage Distress Ink as my first layer, and now I'm using Rustic Wilderness Distress Ink on top. And then once I'm happy with this layer, I will set this aside to dry, clean off my stencils, and then I can go on to the next layer of the Christmas tartan. So to add a bit of Christmas flair, I'm going to use the smaller stencil and some of the Lawn Fawn gold stencil paste on top. So I'm just going to apply this with a small spatula, and it's important that when you're using this stencil paste that you apply it slowly so that you don't accidentally put it underneath the stencil or lift up the stencil while you're applying it. And once I'm happy that I've covered the entire stencil, I'll just wipe off the excess stencil paste and put it back in the pot. Now before cleaning the stencil, I'm going to apply the first layer onto the green Christmas tartan as well. And then I'll set both aside to dry completely. And once they're dry, I'm going to use the same stencil and apply a second layer of that Lawn Fawn gold stencil paste. Now another tip for using this stencil with this Lawn Fawn stencil paste is it's very important to clean your stencil immediately after use. It works best if you use very hot water instead of cold, and make sure you use a rough sponge to get off any of that stencil paste that's stuck on the stencil. Now I'm going to repeat this onto the green Christmas paper as well, so that I have a nice green and a red Christmas tartan. Just gorgeous. So now using the Very Happy Holiday stamp set from Lawn Fawn, I'm going to stamp 2 of the figure skating bears, and I'm going to die cut the main piece from the Flippy Flappy mechanism, and I'm going to use a sentiment from the same Very Happy Holidays stamp set. So I'm going to heat emboss the main stamp set. This says Happy Holidays with some Versamark ink. And I'm going to heat emboss this with some gold embossing powder. And I thought it would match the card if I used a bit of craft card to die cut this piece rather than white. Now once that's melted, I'm going to stamp another sentiment underneath. So the first part says, May your days be, and then the next part is berry and bright. And instead of cutting this sentiment, I'm just using Post-it note tape to mask off half of it so that it fits onto this die cut piece. Now to make this a bit more exciting, I'm going to use some snowflakes that come in the same stamp set and use them to decorate this die cut piece. So I stamped them first in VersaFine ink, and then I used my Altenew Enchanted gold ink and stamped them on top. and that just gives the snowflakes a bit of sparkle and shine. Now I did notice when I was stamping this that I got a bit of a smudge from my finger, so I'm just going to remove that with a sand eraser, and then I'll just add another stamp onto this area, and the recipient will never know. So for the long piece that comes out the bottom of the card, I'm going to use the same ink as the background to tie everything together. So for the red card, I'm going to use Aged Mahogany, and I'll use Rustic Wilderness for the green card. And then I'll use a little bit of that Enchanted gold ink, which will be enough to cut out the arrow piece. So I wanted to showcase as much of that Christmas tartan as I could for this card. So the finished card size will be 5 3/4 inches square. So I've gone ahead and cut a piece that is 5 1/2 inches squared, and this is the piece that will have the main mechanism. The other piece, which is 5 3/4 inches squared, I will need once I add my double-sided tape. So once I folded the main mechanism from the Flippy Flappy, I added the tab piece on and secured it with double-sided tape. So once I've added that, I'm just going to test my mechanism, and then I can add my double-sided foam tape. And I'm going to add this so that it's 2 pieces deep. And I've also added a little bit on the end since this is a larger card. Now I'm going to secure this onto the 5 3/4 inch square piece, and then I'll test that mechanism again. And then I can add the gold arrow on the bottom so the recipient knows to pull the tab. And once that's secure, I'll add some double-sided tape to the white rectangle, and then add my sentiment, my Flippy Flappy sentiment piece onto the card. Now to make this a bit stronger, once I added the double-sided tape, I just reinforced it with a little bit of glue as well, just to make sure that the sentiment piece stays on. And then I'm going to secure this in place and then gently push the Flippy Flappy mechanism into the card. And I'll repeat this a few times until I get the mechanism working smoothly. So I've trimmed down the Christmas tartan pieces to 5 1/2 inch squared, and I also made a blue version with the silver stencil paste and a pink version with the gold, just so that you can see that you could make these tartans for any occasion. I also went ahead and colored the bears with little tartan scarves, and I die cut 2 circles from the small dotted circle stackables. So they're about 2 1/2 inches wide, but you could use any circle dies for this if you prefer. Now I'm just going to put the card together, so I'm going to put the bear onto that 2 1/2 inch circle with foam squares, and then use some more foam squares to put this in the center of that Christmas tartan. And just to add a bit of sparkle, I'm going to use some red and gold gems and put them in various places randomly around the card. And once I'm happy with the placement of those, I'll glue them into place. Now to finish off the card, I'm just going to use a 5 3/4 inch card blank and stamp the bear on the inside using some vintage photo ink. And I'm also going to stamp that Happy Holidays sentiment. Now this is the vintage photo Distress Oxide, as oxides stamp a little easier than Distress ink. And I used some pine needles to stamp on for the green card. Lastly, I'm going to glue the card front onto the card blank, and you can see the finished Christmas tartan cards. So this is the red version, and also the green version. And I just love how those tartan scarves match the tartan in the background. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video inspiring. If you haven't already, Please subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!